There is a conversation that has been building inside you for weeks, maybe even months. And when you finally have it, everything that has been weighing on your chest is going to lift in a way you did not think was possible. If you are a Capricorn, you already know what tension I am talking about. That quiet heaviness that sits between you and someone else. The unspoken words. The careful distance. The way you both keep dancing around the thing that actually needs to be said. You have been carrying this, and it has been costing you more than you realize. Not just emotionally, but physically. In your sleep, in your focus, in the way you show up for everything else in your life. Because when there is unresolved tension with someone who matters to you, it bleeds into everything. It drains energy from places you cannot afford to lose it. And the worst part is that most Capricorns convince themselves that silence is the solution. That if you just wait long enough, the tension will dissolve on its own. But it never does. It just hardens. It becomes the new normal. And before you know it, the relationship has quietly changed into something you barely recognize. This video is about ending that cycle. Not with confrontation, not with drama, but with the kind of calm, intentional conversation that only a Capricorn can deliver when they finally decide the silence has gone on long enough. If you stay with me through every single section, you will know exactly how to have that conversation, and more importantly, why having it will change far more than just one relationship. It will change how you carry yourself through every connection in your life. Let us begin. Tip 1. The weight of what goes unsaid. Every Capricorn carries a certain kind of weight that most people will never understand. It is not the weight of hard work, although you carry that too. It is not the weight of responsibility, although that is always on your shoulders. The weight I am talking about is the weight of everything you choose not to say. Every observation you swallow, every frustration you bury, every honest thought you hold back because the timing does not feel right or because you are afraid of what the truth might cost you. That weight accumulates. And over time, it becomes heavier than anything the outside world could ever put on you. Capricorn energy is naturally reserved. You do not blurt things out. You do not wear your emotions on your sleeve. You process internally. You analyze. You weigh the consequences of every word before it leaves your mouth. And in many ways, that is a tremendous gift. It means you rarely say something you regret. It means your words carry authority because they are never wasted. But there is a shadow side to that gift. And the shadow side is that you hold things in for far too long. You let the unsaid pile up until it becomes a wall between you and the people you care about most. Think about the relationship in your life right now where the most tension exists. I am not asking you to think about a stranger or someone on the periphery. I am asking about someone close. Someone whose opinion matters to you. Someone who you see regularly, maybe even daily. Now ask yourself this honestly. When was the last time you told that person exactly what you were thinking? Not the polished version, not the diplomatic version, the real version, the one that lives underneath all your careful composure. If you cannot remember, that is not a neutral fact. That is a warning sign. Because every day that passes without that truth being spoken is a day the distance between you grows a little wider. The problem is that Capricorns often confuse silence with strength. You tell yourself that you are being mature by not bringing it up, that you are being the bigger person by letting it go. But there is a critical difference between letting something go and burying it alive. When you truly let something go, it stops affecting you. It loses its charge. You can think about it without feeling that knot in your stomach. But when you bury it, it stays alive underneath the surface, feeds on your energy. It colors your interactions with resentment you try to hide, but that the other person can absolutely feel even if they cannot name it. And here is what makes this so dangerous for Capricorn specifically. Your natural discipline allows you to maintain the appearance of normalcy, even when things are falling apart internally. You can smile. You can show up. You can go through the motions so convincingly that no one around you has any idea how much you are holding back. But that performance has a cost. And the cost is your authenticity. The cost is the depth of your connections. Because people cannot truly know you if you never let them see what is actually going on inside. And you cannot experience real intimacy in any kind of relationship if you are always filtering yourself through a layer of strategic composure. The weight of what goes unsaid does not just affect the relationship where the silence exists, spills over into everything. Your patience gets shorter with people who have nothing to do with the situation. Your creativity gets blocked because so much of your mental bandwidth is occupied by the thing you are not addressing. Your body starts to hold the tension in your jaw, your shoulders, your lower back. The unsaid does not disappear because you refuse to say it. It just finds other ways to express itself. And those ways are almost always more destructive than the conversation you are avoiding. This is not about becoming someone who says everything that crosses your mind. That would go against your nature, and honestly, the world does not need that from you. This is about recognizing when silence has stopped being a strategy and started being a cage. When the thing you are not saying has become louder than anything you could possibly say. When the weight of holding it in has become heavier than the risk of letting it out. That is when you know it is time. And Capricorn, for many of you listening right now, that time has already come and gone. The conversation is overdue. But the beautiful thing about Capricorn energy is that it is never too late to build something right, even if you have to tear down something old to do it. Tip 2. Tension is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Most people run from tension. They feel it building in a relationship, and their first instinct is to smooth it over. Change the subject. Crack a joke. Pretend nothing is wrong. And for a while, that works. The surface stays calm. Everyone keeps smiling. But underneath that calm surface, the tension is not gone. It is growing. It is taking root. And the longer it grows unchecked, the harder it becomes to remove without causing serious damage. Capricorn, you need to understand something that will fundamentally change how you approach difficult relationships. Tension itself is not the problem. Avoidance of tension is the problem. And those are two very different things. Tension is actually a sign of health in a relationship. It means that two people care enough about the connection to have different perspectives. It means there is enough depth between you that friction is possible. Shallow relationships never produce tension because there is nothing at stake. There is no investment, no vulnerability, no real risk of loss. So when you feel tension with someone, before you run from it or try to bury it, recognize what it actually represents. It represents the fact that this relationship matters. And anything that matters is worth the discomfort of addressing honestly. The avoidance pattern that most Capricorns fall into looks something like this. You notice something that bothers you. Maybe it is something the other person said. Maybe it is something they did or did not do. You feel the tension flicker inside you. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can address it immediately while it is small and manageable, or you can file it away. Tell yourself it is not worth bringing up. Convince yourself that you are being too sensitive or making too big a deal out of something minor. And so you stay quiet. The moment passes, but the tension does not. A week later, something similar happens. The tension flickers again, a little stronger this time, and again you file it away. Another week, another incident, another filing, and now you have a drawer full of filed away frustrations that are all connected to the same root issue. And the thing about that drawer is that it has a limit. At some point, it cannot hold any more. And when it finally overflows, the response is completely disproportionate to whatever triggered it. You explode over something small because it was never about the small thing. It was about the 50 small things that came before it that you never addressed. And now the other person is confused and hurt because from their perspective, you went from 0 to 10 over nothing. But it was never nothing. It was everything you never said finally demanding to be heard. This is why avoidance is so much more dangerous than tension. Tension is a signal. It is your inner wisdom telling you that something needs attention. When you respond to that signal promptly and honestly, the conversation is usually short. It is usually manageable. It might be slightly uncomfortable, but it resolves quickly and the relationship actually grows stronger because of it. But when you ignore the signal over and over again, you are not avoiding the conversation. You are guaranteeing that when the conversation finally happens, it will be 10 times harder than it needed to be. Capricorn, your ability to endure is legendary, but endurance without expression is just suffering with good posture. You do not earn extra points for how long you can hold tension inside without breaking. That is not strength. That is compression. And compressed things eventually explode. The goal is not to become someone who never feels tension. The goal is to become someone who addresses tension while it is still a conversation, before it becomes a crisis. That shift, from avoidance to early address, is one of the most transformative things a Capricorn can learn. And it starts with accepting that discomfort is not a reason to stay silent. Discomfort is a reason to speak. Because the temporary discomfort of an honest conversation is nothing compared to the permanent damage of a relationship that died from neglect. And what comes next will show you exactly how to start that conversation without losing yourself in the process. If what you're hearing feels accurate, imagine what could happen if you apply this energy intentionally for 21 consecutive days. That's exactly what the 21-day program in the pinned comment is built for. Daily guidance, focused direction, and real momentum. If you're tired of staying in the same cycle, this is your structure. Tip 3. Choose the right moment, not the convenient one. Timing is everything when it comes to the conversation that ends the tension. And Capricorn, you instinctively know this. You have a natural sense of when things are ready and when they are not. But here is where many Capricorns make a critical error. They confuse waiting for the right moment with waiting indefinitely. They keep telling themselves that the timing is not right, that next week would be better, that they need to wait until things calm down, until the other person is in a better mood, until the circumstances are perfect. But perfect circumstances do not exist. And if you wait for them, you will be waiting forever while the tension continues to build and the relationship continues to erode. The right moment for a difficult conversation is not when everything is perfect. The right moment is when you are centered enough to speak from your truth without being driven by anger or resentment. There is a massive difference between those two things. You do not need the external world to be calm. You need your internal world to be clear. You need to know what you want to say. You need to know why you want to say it. And you need to be in a state where your intention is connection, not punishment. Because if you approach the conversation wanting to make the other person feel bad for what they have done, you are not resolving tension. You are transferring it. And transferred tension always comes back with interest. Here is a practical way to know if the timing is right for you. Ask yourself 3 questions before you initiate the conversation. First, am I calm enough to listen as much as I speak? If the answer is no, wait, not forever. Just until your emotional temperature has come down enough that you can hear the other person without immediately becoming defensive. Second, do I know what outcome I am actually hoping for? Not what I want to say, but what I want the conversation to achieve. If you do not have clarity on the outcome, you are going into the conversation without a destination. And conversations without destinations tend to wander into dangerous territory. Third, am I willing to hear something I do not want to hear? Because a real conversation is not a monologue. The other person has their own perspective, their own frustrations, their own filed away tensions that they have been carrying too. And if you are not prepared to receive that, you are not ready for a conversation. You are ready for a speech. And speeches do not resolve tension. They create more of it. Once you can answer yes to all 3 of those questions, the timing is right. Even if the external circumstances are not ideal, even if the other person seems busy or distracted, even if it is a weeknight and you both have things to do in the morning. Because here is the truth about timing that most people miss. There will always be a reason to postpone. There will always be something that makes now seem inconvenient. But inconvenience is not a valid reason to let a relationship continue deteriorating. The cost of an awkward evening is nothing compared to the cost of another month of silence and distance. Capricorns are planners by nature. You like to have everything organized before you act. And that instinct serves you well in most areas of life. But when it comes to emotional conversations, over-planning can become its own form of avoidance. You can spend so long preparing for the conversation that you never actually have it. You rehearse it in your head 100 times. You anticipate every possible response. You create contingency plans for contingency plans. And all of that mental activity creates the illusion of progress while nothing actually changes in the real world. The right moment is not something you find. It is something you create. You create it by deciding that today. The silence ends. That today, you will speak your truth with calm clarity and genuine intention. Not when the stars align. Not when you feel perfectly ready. But when you recognize that the cost of waiting has become greater than the cost of speaking, that moment, for many of you, is right now. And the section that follows will show you exactly what to say when that moment arrives. Tip 4. Lead with what you need, not what they did. This is where most difficult conversations go wrong. And it is where Capricorn energy can either become your greatest ally or your most frustrating obstacle. When you finally sit down to have the conversation that has been building for weeks or months, the natural instinct is to start with the evidence, to lay out everything the other person has done wrong, to present your case like a prosecutor building an argument. Here is what you did on this date. Here is what you said on that occasion. Here is the pattern I have noticed. Here is why you are the reason this tension exists. And from a logical standpoint, that approach makes perfect sense. You are a Capricorn. You deal in facts. You build your arguments on evidence. You want the other person to see clearly what they have done so they can acknowledge it and change. But here is why that approach almost always fails. When you lead with accusations, even well-organized and factually accurate ones, the other person stops listening. Their defenses go up immediately. They are no longer hearing your pain. They are preparing their rebuttal. They are scanning their memory for counter-evidence. They are looking for holes in your argument. And now, instead of a conversation, you have a trial. And in a trial, nobody wins. There is just a verdict. And verdicts do not resolve tension. They create winners and losers. And relationships cannot survive that dynamic. The alternative is something that might feel uncomfortable for a Capricorn, but it is infinitely more effective. Instead of leading with what they did, lead with what you need. Instead of saying you always do this thing that hurts me, say I need to feel safe in this relationship and lately I have not been feeling that way. Instead of saying you never listen to me, say I need to feel heard and I want us to find a way to make that happen. The shift is subtle, but the impact is enormous. When you lead with your needs, you are not attacking. You are inviting. You are opening a door rather than building a wall. And even the most defensive person finds it difficult to argue with someone who is simply expressing what they need. This approach works for Capricorn specifically because it aligns with your natural strength as a builder. You are not tearing something down when you express your needs. You are showing the other person the blueprint for what you want to build together. You are saying, here is what a healthy version of this relationship looks like to me. Here is what I need from you in order to feel valued and connected. That is a constructive conversation. That is building something. And building is what you do best. Now, this does not mean you ignore what happened. The incidents that created the tension are real and they matter. But they serve a different purpose in this conversation. They are not the opening argument. They are the context. After you have expressed what you need, you can reference specific situations as examples, not to prove a point, but to help the other person understand what the experience has been like for you. The difference is in the framing. When you say you did this and it hurt me, the focus is on blame. When you say I need this and here is a recent example of when that need was not met, the focus is on understanding. And understanding is the bridge that carries you from tension to resolution. Capricorn, your ability to organize information and present it clearly is one of your greatest gifts. Use that gift here, but use it in service of connection rather than conviction. The goal is not to win the conversation. The goal is to end the tension. And those two things require completely different approaches. Winning requires proving the other person wrong. Ending tension requires helping both of you feel understood. And when both people feel understood, the tension has nowhere left to live. Dissolves, not because someone conceded or apologized, although those things might happen naturally, but because the truth was finally spoken in a way that both people could receive. That is the power of leading with what you need. And it is a skill that will transform not just this one conversation, but every difficult conversation you have for the rest of your life. Tip 5. Lower your armor without losing your power. There is a protective layer that every Capricorn wears. You might not call it armor. You might call it composure, or professionalism, or emotional discipline. But whatever name you give it, it serves the same purpose. It keeps people from getting too close to the parts of you that feel vulnerable. And in most situations, that armor serves you well. It keeps you steady in chaos. It prevents you from being manipulated by people who would use your emotions against you. It gives you the kind of unshakable presence that people admire and rely on. But when it comes to the conversation that ends the tension, the armor has to come down, at least partially, because you cannot resolve emotional tension while wearing emotional protection. It does not work. The other person can sense the barrier between you even if they cannot articulate it. They know that they are talking to your shield, not to you. And as long as the shield is up, nothing real can be exchanged. Nothing can heal. Nothing can shift. The conversation might happen on a surface level. Words might be spoken and received, but the tension will remain because the vulnerable truth underneath the armor was never actually touched. This is one of the hardest things for a Capricorn to do. Vulnerability does not come naturally to you. In fact, for many Capricorns, vulnerability feels like the opposite of everything you stand for. You have spent your entire life building yourself into someone who is strong, someone who handles things, someone who does not break down or fall apart when life gets difficult. And now I am telling you that in order to resolve this tension, you need to let the other person see behind the curtain. I understand why that feels terrifying, but here is what I need you to understand. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength because it requires you to be powerful enough to show your soft places without fear of being destroyed. Think about it this way. Anyone can hide behind armor. That takes no courage at all. You just put the walls up and refuse to let anything in. But choosing to lower those walls in the presence of someone who has the power to hurt you, that takes a level of bravery that most people will never achieve. And when you do it, something remarkable happens. The other person's armor starts to come down too, because vulnerability is contagious. When one person in a conversation takes the risk of being real, it creates permission for the other person to do the same. And suddenly, you are no longer two armored figures having a careful exchange. You are two human beings having a genuine conversation. And genuine conversations are the only ones that actually change anything. This does not mean you bear your entire soul in one sitting. Capricorn energy is strategic even in vulnerability. You do not have to share every wound you have ever received or every fear that keeps you up at night. That would be overwhelming for both of you. What you need to share is the specific vulnerability that connects to the specific tension you are addressing. If the tension is about feeling taken for granted, share what it feels like to give everything and feel like it goes unnoticed. Not as an accusation, as a truth. If the tension is about feeling disconnected, share what that disconnection does to you emotionally. Not to make them feel guilty, but to let them understand the real impact of what has been happening between you. Your power does not come from being invulnerable. Your power comes from being fully present in any situation, including the uncomfortable ones. And full presence requires openness. It requires the willingness to be seen. Not the polished version of you that the world gets to see, but the real version. The one who sometimes doubts. The one who sometimes hurts. The one who sometimes needs reassurance even though asking for it feels like admitting defeat. That version of you is not weaker than the armored version. That version is actually stronger, because that version is honest. And honesty, especially when it is difficult, is the most powerful force a Capricorn can wield. The next section will show you what happens when you combine that honesty with something else. Something that transforms the entire dynamic of any conversation. Tip 6. Listen beyond the words. Most people think they know how to listen. They stay quiet while the other person talks. They nod. They wait for their turn to respond. But that is not listening. That is waiting. And there is a universe of difference between the two. Real listening, the kind that actually resolves tension and heals rifts in relationships, requires you to hear what is not being said, to pay attention to the pauses, to notice the shift in tone, to feel the emotion underneath the carefully chosen words. And Capricorn, this is an area where your natural observational skills can become one of your most powerful tools, if you are willing to use them. When you sit down for the conversation that ends the tension, the other person is going to speak, and what they say might surprise you. It might frustrate you. It might not align with the narrative you have been carrying in your head for weeks. And that is exactly the moment where most conversations break down. Because instead of truly hearing what the other person is saying, You start mentally preparing your response. You start looking for flaws in their argument. You start defending your position before they have even finished explaining theirs. And in doing so, you miss the most important part. You miss the feeling behind their words. You miss the fear that is making them defensive. You miss the hurt that is making them accusatory. You miss the love that is hiding underneath all the frustration. Capricorn energy is incredibly analytical. You process information quickly and efficiently, but emotional conversations do not follow the rules of logic. They follow the rules of the heart. And the heart does not communicate in organized arguments and well-structured points. It communicates in tone and tears and silence and the way someone looks away when they are trying not to show how much something affected them. If you approach the conversation with only your analytical mind engaged, you will hear the words but miss the message. And the message is always more important than the words. Here is how to practice real listening in a tense conversation. When the other person speaks, do not plan your response. Just receive what they are saying. Let it land. Feel it in your body. Notice where it creates a reaction in you. And instead of acting on that reaction immediately, just observe it. This is new territory for most Capricorns. You are used to being in control. You are used to having a response ready before the other person has even finished their sentence. But control in a healing conversation looks different than control in a boardroom. In a boardroom, control means having the best answer fastest. In a healing conversation, control means having the patience to not answer at all until you have truly understood what the other person needs you to hear. Ask clarifying questions, not challenging questions, clarifying ones. There is a big difference. A challenging question sounds like, "So you are saying this is all my fault?" A clarifying question sounds like, "Can you help me understand what that experience felt like for you?" The first one is defensive. The second one is curious. And curiosity is one of the most healing things you can bring to a tense conversation. When someone feels that you are genuinely trying to understand them, rather than trying to defeat them, their entire energy changes. The walls come down. The accusations soften. The conversation shifts from combat to collaboration. And that shift is where the real healing begins. There is also something powerful about reflecting back what you hear, not parroting their words, but showing them that you receive the deeper meaning. When they say, "I feel like you never make time for me," and you respond with, "It sounds like you've been feeling like this relationship is not a priority for me, and that must be really painful." Something shifts. They feel seen. They feel heard. They feel like the armor they have been wearing around you can finally come down because you are not going to use their vulnerability against them. And that moment, that single moment of genuine understanding, can dissolve more tension than hours of debate and discussion. Capricorn, listening beyond the words is not about being passive. It is about being present, fully and completely present with another human being in a way that most people never experience. And when you bring that level of presence to the conversation that has been weighing on you, you will discover that many of the things you were afraid to hear are actually doorways to deeper connection. The other person is not your enemy. They are someone who has also been carrying tension. They have also been afraid. They have also been wondering when the distance between you would finally close. Your willingness to listen, truly listen, is the key that opens that door. And what you will find on the other side is not conflict. It is relief. Tip 7. Speak in a way that builds a bridge, not a case. Every word you choose in a difficult conversation is either a brick in a bridge or a brick in a wall. And Capricorn, you are a master builder. You know how to construct things that last. But in emotional conversations, the temptation is to build the wrong thing, to construct an airtight case instead of a sturdy bridge, to prove that you are right instead of proving that you care. And the tragedy is that you can be completely right about everything and still lose the relationship because of how you communicated your rightness. The language of bridge building is different from the language of case building. Case building language is precise and accusatory. It uses words like always and never. It catalogs offenses and presents patterns. It is designed to convince. Bridge building language is warm and inclusive. It uses words like we and us and together. It acknowledges shared responsibility. It is designed to connect. And the conversation that ends the tension requires bridge building language, even if every fiber of your Capricorn logic is screaming to present the case instead. Here is why this matters so much. When you build a case against someone, even when the evidence supports you completely, you are positioning yourself as the aggrieved party and them as the offender. And once those roles are assigned, the conversation is no longer about understanding, it is about judgment. You become the judge, they become the defendant, and nobody, absolutely nobody, responds well to being put on trial by someone they care about. They shut down, they counterattack, they bring up your offenses to balance the scales. And suddenly the conversation that was supposed to end the tension has created 10 times more of it. Bridge building language starts with the assumption that both people contributed to the tension. And before you resist that idea, think about it honestly. Tension in a relationship is almost never 100% one person's fault. Maybe their actions created the initial rupture, but your silence allowed it to grow. Your avoidance gave it space to fester. Your unwillingness to address it early meant that small issues became big issues that became seemingly impossible issues. You are not equally responsible for every specific incident, but you are equally responsible for the state of the relationship. Because a relationship is built by two people, and it deteriorates when either one of them stops doing their part. Your part included speaking up sooner, and acknowledging that, even briefly, changes the entire tone of the conversation. Try saying something like this. I know I have not always made it easy to talk about difficult things. I tend to go quiet when I am upset, and I know that creates its own kind of tension. I want to change that pattern, and I think this conversation is a good place to start. Do you hear how different that is from you need to stop doing this thing that bothers me? The first version invites. The second version demands. The first version acknowledges your role. The second version assigns all the blame to the other person. And the first version, because it demonstrates self-awareness and humility, makes the other person want to meet you in the middle. It makes them want to offer their own acknowledgments. It creates a collaborative atmosphere where both people are working together to fix something that both people care about. Capricorn, your natural precision with language can serve you beautifully here. You have the ability to say exactly what you mean with clarity and intention. Use that ability to build bridges. Choose words that create openings rather than closings. Choose phrases that include rather than exclude. Choose a tone that invites reflection rather than defensiveness. Because the goal of this conversation is not to establish who was wrong. The goal is to rebuild what was broken. And you cannot rebuild with a sledgehammer. You rebuild with care, with patience, with the same steady determination that defines everything a Capricorn touches. Speak in a way that honors both your truth and the relationship. That is the Capricorn way. And it is the only way the tension truly ends. Tip 8. Let go of the outcome without letting go of your intention. This is perhaps the most difficult thing I will ask of you in this entire video. And it goes against one of the deepest instincts in the Capricorn nature. You are a planner, a strategist, a builder who always has the end result in mind before the first brick is laid. When you enter a situation, you know what you want the outcome to be, and you work backward from that outcome to determine every step along the way. That approach has served you brilliantly in your career, in your finances, in every area of life where results are within your control. But in a conversation designed to end tension between you and another person, that approach can actually work against you. Because here is the truth that most Capricorns struggle to accept. You cannot control how another person responds to your honesty. You can choose the perfect words. You can time the conversation perfectly. You can lead with your needs and listen beyond the words and build bridges instead of cases. You can do everything right. And the other person might still not respond the way you hoped. They might not be ready to hear what you are saying. They might not be in a place where they can receive your vulnerability. They might need time to process before they can meet you in the space you have created. And if you are attached to a specific outcome, that reality will crush you. Letting go of the outcome does not mean not caring about what happens. It means separating your intention from your expectation. Your intention is clear. You want to speak your truth and create space for genuine understanding. Hold on to that with everything you have. That is yours. That is within your control. But the expectation, the specific picture you have in your head of how this conversation is going to go and how the other person is going to respond and what the relationship is going to look like afterward, that expectation needs to be released. because expectations are just resentments waiting to happen. And you did not come this far to create more resentment. Think about it from a builder's perspective. When you construct something, you control the materials, the design, the craftsmanship, but you do not control the weather. You do not control how people will use the building. You do not control what the world looks like around it. You build it with the best of your ability, and then you let it exist in the world on its own terms. That is what this conversation needs to be. You bring your best self. You speak your clearest truth. You listen with your fullest presence. And then you let the conversation exist on its own terms. Whatever happens after that is information, not failure. Some of the most transformative conversations in life do not resolve neatly in the moment. Sometimes the other person walks away needing time to think. Sometimes the initial response is defensive or dismissive. Sometimes the real breakthrough does not come until days or even weeks later, when your words have had time to sink in and the other person has had time to move past their initial reaction. If you are attached to an immediate resolution, you might mistake a delayed response for rejection, and you might close the door just before the other person was ready to walk through it. Capricorn, your strength is your ability to hold steady through uncertainty. Use that strength here. Have the conversation. Speak your truth. Create the opening, and then let it breathe. Do not chase. Do not demand an immediate answer. Do not fill the silence with more words, because the silence feels unbearable. Just hold the space. Hold your intention, and trust that you have done your part. Whatever the other person does with what you have given them is their journey, not yours. Your journey was having the courage to speak, and that courage, regardless of the outcome, is already a victory. That conversation changed something inside you the moment you decided to stop avoiding it. And that internal change will ripple outward into every relationship you have. Whether this particular conversation goes the way you hoped or not. Some people watch, others transform. If you want to be in the second group, the 21-day guide in the pinned comment gives you a clear step-by-step process aligned with your sign. This isn't about waiting, it's about moving. Tip 9. After the conversation, what you do next matters more. The conversation happened. The words were spoken. Maybe there were tears. Maybe there was silence. Maybe there was a moment of genuine connection that you have not felt with this person in a long time. But now comes the part that most people get wrong. And it is the part that determines whether the tension is truly over or whether it just went underground to resurface again in a few months. What you do after the difficult conversation is more important than anything you said during it. Because words without follow-through are just noise. And Capricorn, you are not built for noise. You are built for substance. The first thing that happens after a difficult conversation is a wave of vulnerability. You said things you have been holding in for a long time. You let someone see parts of you that you normally keep hidden. And now, in the aftermath, your Capricorn instincts are going to tell you to retreat, to put the armor back on, to act like the conversation was not as big a deal as it actually was, to minimize your vulnerability retroactively because sitting with it feels too exposed. Resist that urge, because if you retreat after opening up, you send the message that your honesty was temporary, that the real you only makes brief appearances before disappearing behind the wall again. And the other person will learn that your vulnerability is not something they can count on, which means the next time tension builds, they will not believe that a real conversation is possible. They will assume you will just retreat again. Instead of retreating, lean in, not in a dramatic or overwhelming way, just in small, consistent actions that reinforce what you said. If you told the person that you want to feel more connected, initiate connection. If you said you needed to feel heard, make a point of hearing them. If you expressed a desire for the relationship to change, start being the change before you ask them to match it. This is where Capricorn energy shines, because you know how to build things one step at a time. You know that lasting structures are not built in a single day but through consistent daily effort. Apply that same philosophy to the relationship. There is also a temptation after a big conversation to monitor the other person for signs of change, to keep score, to track whether they are living up to what was discussed. And while some awareness is natural and healthy, turning into an auditor of the other person's behavior will destroy everything the conversation built. It creates a dynamic where the other person feels like they are being tested rather than trusted. And people who feel tested do not grow. They perform. And performance eventually collapses because it is not sustainable. Trust them to process at their own pace. Trust that the conversation planted seeds even if you cannot see the growth yet. Capricorn, you understand patience better than almost anyone. You know that the best things take time. A conversation that ends long-standing tension is not a magic wand that transforms everything overnight. It is a foundation, the first layer of a new structure being built between you and this person. And foundations need time to set before you start building on top of them. Give it time. Give the other person time. Give yourself time. And keep showing up with the same honesty and openness that you brought to the conversation. Even on the days when it feels easier to go back to the old patterns. The old patterns are comfortable. They are familiar. And they will call to you. The silence will feel easier than the continued vulnerability. The distance will feel safer than the continued closeness. But comfort and safety are not the same as health and growth. And you know the difference. You have always known the difference. The conversation was the hard part. What comes after is the steady part. And steady is your specialty. This is where you build something that lasts. Not in the dramatic moment of truth, but in the quiet days that follow when the real work of transformation happens one small choice at a time. And the next section will show you something that makes all of this sustainable. Something that turns a single conversation into a permanent shift. Tip 10. Make honesty a practice, not an event. The conversation that ends the tension is powerful. It is necessary. It is sometimes the bravest thing a Capricorn can do. But here is the truth that most people never learn. If honesty only happens in crisis, you will always be managing crises. If the only time you speak your truth is when the tension has become unbearable, you are living in a constant cycle of buildup and release. Silence, tension, explosion, relief, and then silence again as the cycle starts over. That is not a life. That is a pattern. And patterns only break when you make a deliberate choice to do something differently every single day. Honesty needs to become a daily practice for you, Capricorn, not just in the big moments, in the small ones, in the moments that seem too insignificant to mention, in the micro frustrations and the quiet disappointments and the subtle shifts that you normally file away because they do not seem worth bringing up. Because those small moments are where the tension starts. Every major conflict you have ever experienced in a relationship began as something small that was ignored. Every wall that was eventually built between you and someone you love started with a single brick that you chose not to address. And if you can learn to address the small things in real time, the big things never get a chance to form. This does not mean becoming someone who complains about every minor irritation. That would be exhausting for everyone, including you. It means developing the habit of regular emotional check-ins with the people who matter to you. Not formal sit-down conversations every time. Sometimes it is as simple as saying, "Hey, something has been on my mind and I want to share it while it is still small." Or, "I noticed something between us and I want to make sure we talk about it before it becomes a thing." Those small moments of honesty prevent the accumulation that leads to the big conversation. They keep the channels of communication open so that tension never has the chance to build into something that requires a major intervention. Think of it like maintenance on a building. You can wait until the roof is leaking and the foundation is cracking to do repairs. Or you can perform regular maintenance that catches small issues before they become structural problems. Both approaches deal with the same building, but one of them preserves it and the other one is constantly rescuing it from the brink of collapse. You are a builder, Capricorn. You understand maintenance. You understand that prevention is always less costly than repair. Apply that same logic to your relationships. Regular honesty is maintenance. It keeps the structure sound. It prevents the small cracks from becoming major fractures. And here is what happens when honesty becomes a practice rather than an event. The fear goes away. Not completely, but significantly. Right now, honesty probably feels heavy to you. Feels like a big deal every time you have to say something difficult. But that is only because you do it so rarely. When you start doing it regularly, it becomes normal. It becomes part of how you communicate rather than an exception to how you communicate. The other person gets used to it too. They learn that your honesty is not an attack. It is just how you operate. And they start matching it. They start sharing their own small truths before those truths become big issues. And suddenly, Without any dramatic intervention, the relationship transforms, not because one conversation changed everything, but because 100 small honest moments created a foundation of trust that tension cannot penetrate. Capricorn, you were designed for consistency. It is woven into your very nature. The ability to show up every day and do the work that others find tedious or difficult is your superpower. Now apply that consistency to your emotional life. Show up every day with honesty, not as a grand gesture, not as a performance, just as a quiet commitment to speaking your truth while it is still a whisper, before it becomes a scream. That is how you end the cycle. That is how you prevent tension from ever reaching the point where a major conversation is necessary. And that is how you build relationships that do not just survive, but thrive, built on a foundation of daily truth, daily courage, daily Capricorn strength applied to the one area of life that most Capricorns have always found hardest: your heart. Everything we have talked about today leads to this single understanding. The tension you have been carrying does not have to define your relationships. It does not have to be the invisible wall that keeps you from the closeness you deserve. The conversation that ends the tension is not just about resolving one specific issue with one specific person. It is about reclaiming a part of yourself that you have been hiding for far too long. The part that feels deeply. The part that wants connection just as much as it wants achievement. The part that has been waiting patiently and quietly for you to give it permission to speak. Capricorn, you have spent so much of your life being strong for others, holding things together when everything was falling apart, being the one who endures, the one who carries the weight without complaining. And that strength is real. It is admirable. It is one of the reasons people respect you as much as they do. But strength without honesty becomes isolation. Endurance without expression becomes resentment. And the very qualities that make you powerful can become the very things that keep you lonely if you never learn to let people in. The conversation you have been avoiding is not as scary as you think it is. The tension that has been building is not as permanent as it feels. And the vulnerability that you have been resisting is not the threat your mind has convinced you it is. It is actually the doorway to deeper connection, to lighter shoulders, to the kind of relationships that Capricorn energy was always meant to build. Ones that are honest and enduring and real. You do not have to figure it all out today. You do not have to have every word planned before you open your mouth. You just have to decide that the silence has lasted long enough, that the person on the other side of this tension deserves to hear your truth, and that you deserve to live without the weight of carrying everything alone. Because you do. You deserve that. You have always deserved that. And the only thing standing between you and the lighter version of your life is one honest conversation, followed by another, and another, and another. That is how mountains are climbed, one step at a time. And nobody climbs mountains like a Capricorn. The energy around you right now is supporting this shift. It is creating space for the words you have been holding back. It is softening the ground for the seeds you are about to plant. All you have to do is trust yourself enough to begin. Not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect. Now, because you are ready, even if it does not feel like it. You are ready. Your whole life has been preparing you for this kind of courage. And the people who truly belong in your life, they are ready too. They have been waiting for you to let them in. So let them in. Speak your truth. End the tension. And watch as everything you have been building quietly, patiently, behind the scenes, finally starts to rise into view. You have two options after this video. Close it and hope things shift. Or decide that the next 21 days will be different. If you choose the second, the structured 21-day transformation aligned with your sign is waiting in the pinned comment. The energy is already moving, the only question is whether you are.